We are now officially recording.
Ooh, I shouldn't do that. They give me balloons whenever I do this.
Sweet. All right. Well, welcome, friends and fellow Damons, to Damonosophy. My guest today is Shane Bugbee, promoter, publisher of Diabolical Works. I'm sure a lot of other things in between all that span somewhere in Anton LaVey's living room in the early '90s to the founding of the Satanic Temple. And he's here today to talk about his new book, The Founding of the Satanic Temple. There you go. Yeah. And it looks like fucking awesome. I'm just so blown away with the cover, the design on it is just so sweet. I love it. So
thanks.
hey,
that cover's by Nick Gernert. Nick Gernert. I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you say welcome?
Yeah, I said welcome, Shane. Hey, how's it going?
Thanks, Paul. Nice to be here. I'm really excited to be here. I find your content on Instagram so smart, and so that's how I found you. I saw this stuff I'm reading, and usually when someone talks about Satanism or anything in that direction, I'm disappointed. Usually it's just a rehashing of LaVey or some nonsense. But I love what you put out, so I'm just honored to be here. It's great.
Well, awesome. I appreciate that. Talking about us making this connection, I think our mutual friend Stanton LaVey had a lot to do with that. I'd had him on the show, and he was at some point he was telling me about one of your events that you had coming up in Chicago, which I was excited to hear more about. But then I think he might have left the earth shortly after that. But anyhow, it makes sense then that we would connect on social media and eventually get together for this conversation.
Yeah, I think I was following you before that moment, but yeah, Stanton was a very character, but there's hard to put words to a person. Some people, and Stanton was one of those people. It's hard to put words to.
Yeah,
we had a very exciting, extreme relationship where we went from death threats to loving each other back and forth often. So.
Yeah, a lot of people, like that he reminded me of that, and I never got that tight with him. I interviewed him, and I'd met him once, several years over a decade ago. I'd met him when my band Asmodeus X was playing in Hollywood. He came out to a show, and I got to meet him then, and he was just a real nice guy, real great guy. And his perspective on things, on Satanism in general, is so unique. His vantage point is really unique. So
I appreciated Stanton for those reasons, but he understood it. He understood it we related on our understanding of things because we came at it from a counterculture perspective. First time I had run into Stanton was when he was running this with John Asenile, this zine store in Los Angeles. The Odium, I think it was called. And so he was into counterculture. He understood the entirety of the counterculture. He didn't just understand Satanism, which most people that I find in Satanism only understand Satanism. They don't get that it's a counterculture movement. Or at least it was. Now it's becoming mainstream, becoming the culture.
Oh yeah. And so there's a great point about that I think Anton LaVey, that was a part of the whole package of his teaching involves this appreciation of a counterculture. But it was the counterculture of from his time period initially. So what Stanton did is he kind of updated that a little bit, brought it into the post I would say 70s and 80s. I think Anton LaVey turned off his input on counterculture sometime around in the 70s or so. And Stanton kind of continued it on from there.
Well, Stanton was influenced by old timers like myself or John S. Nile, who were still clinging to the counterculture. So Stanton doesn't get all the credit, but he was a good faith person. Well, I'm just being
Yeah.
honest. I'm just the history matters to me. The linear part of history matters, and it's important to say that. It's not to diminish his thing. It's that understanding that he's 10 years younger than me. He was, and he paid attention to his elders. He studied his elders. He studied the people that were before him and took that in. And that's missing from a lot of people. There's a perverse ego within Satanism, and there's a healthy one. And a lot of people that get into it newly, they have this perverse ego. They're know-it-alls, let's say, and they discount their elders. You see it with the lot of the satanic talk online. They'll talk shit about LaVey, and it's like you're dancing in his garden. Are you kidding me? Like these are trails that he blazed, the LaVeys blazed, the family of the LaVeys blazed. And people, all of his priests, LaVey's priests, really blazed these trails, and to discount them is a serious red flag. People should see it as a red flag. When people are talking shit about LaVey or any of his hierarchy, not Peter's,
Yeah.
his guard, the old guard, that's a serious red flag to me.
Yeah.
Because it's just not paying attention to the people who blaze the trails, who planted the seeds that you're reaping the fruit from.
Right. Exactly. And it's not even a matter of imagining, oh, would we be friends right now if we were like, hanging out on the, would we like the same music or whatever? It's a matter of people like that, like they did something like really significant, for the time period, and they left something behind that is important, that is significant, that resonates with certain people. To me, it's like I like to talk about Black Fire a lot, and there's this essence of that was left behind by that, and that is what is like so significant about it. Not the little details of, oh, what if we tried to fit him into a modern context? Would he be politically correct, or would he be cool, or whatever? It has nothing to do with it.
Right, and they frame it in this way that in this weird way where they frame it as a discounting of people, but what they really want to say is they don't agree with them, and that's fine. I mean, Stanton didn't agree. I don't agree with a lot of stuff that let's say the elders before me were Boyd, Adam Parfry, stuff like that, and I didn't really agree with a lot of stuff they were doing, but I didn't have to. But I recognize their importance. I recognize what they did, the timeline of it. I recognize what they were driving and their influence on culture. Even though I don't need to like them, I don't need to agree with them. But to say that they weren't important is pretty silly.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to you. So you are a cultural influencer too in all of this, and this is something that you talk about in your new book. And before we talk about that per se, I'm gonna note that for me, it comes back to this book right here.
My goodness, you have the original, the OG.
That's right. No, damn straight I do. Yeah. And so I did not. By the time I got this book and had read it, apparently you are responsible for this coming into being.
I am. I am. Yep. And that is stuck on my shoe forever. It's still there. People really have a hard time with that book, and it's caused, I would say, a lot of. Carla talks about it. It caused a lot of grief in my life, but I don't mind that. I mean, I mind it, but I don't, because it's an exciting life. It's cool. I chose that path, and it's better than being a plumber.
Yeah.
So it's fun, and I did things to shake things up, but that really shook things up. And when LaVey, it's funny, that's the book. I haven't seen that in years. Well, no, I did see it a couple of years ago, and I sold it for like $800. I found one in a box and sold it for $800. But so I remember when LaVey walked into the room when I first met him, he's holding that book, Bugbee, that book right there. And you just don't know what you're doing here with this. This is pure dynamite. This is pure dynamite, kid. You don't know what you're putting on the streets. Because he knew what he took me in as a counterculture person. I was, as a person that was a prominent publisher back in that day. And And he was right. I didn't, I was like, yeah, I get it. I put out obscene books, guy. I get what I'm doing. I know just what I'm doing, old man. I didn't, but young guy like me, I think I know everything. And he was right. That thing set fires everywhere, and lo and behold, I look on it today and I see 15 people publishing that book. It's
Yeah.
all over the internet. It's all over the internet. And it's like, wow, when we did the when I published that, it wasn't anywhere. Loom Panics had it, and they were sort of not selling it. So it was
Yeah.
it's
No, it's like it's definitely a mover, a cultural mover and shaker. Can you recount for us, and you do this a little bit in your new book, can you recount for us briefly like how you came to like publish this?
oh
And
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was doing the Milwaukee Metal Fest. I was doing the Milwaukee Metal Fest.
so just a brief aside here, Milwaukee Metal Fest, attending Milwaukee Metal Fest for me was how I met the people that ended up in me moving to Houston, Texas.
Wow. Okay. Well,
There was something magical about Milwaukee Metal Fest.
yeah, Milwaukee Metal Fest. Well, here's the book, and
Okay.
and, and this is where and there's the last interview with LeVay's in here. But so doing that book, I got an offer from a white supremacist label called Resistance Records, and they wanted to put ads in there, and I was like, wow, I don't know what to do here. I was like, I am a free speech person, so I was like, I didn't have a problem with it, but the person who did the cover was a person of color, and the main writer was a Jewish, Dina Weinstein. She's a DePaul University professor. And so I asked, every white person I worked with said, you can't do it, which made me want to do it more. But
Mm-hmm.
then Dina and Al said, you have to do it. You can't, if you if you don't give them that advertising space, they'll make a controversy out of it to be bigger than what it should be. And when you create these kind of controversies, young people are attracted to that. That's what Dina said. Young people will be attracted to it if it's a controversy. If you just put it out there and let it be as dumb as it is, it'll dissipate. So I did what they suggested, and the money was great. I mean, they were handing me a ton of money. And so, but at the same time, when they handed me that check, George Eric Hawthorne, he handed me Might is Right. He's like, this is a book. This is our Bible. This is what we're about. And I approached it as like a journalist as well. So I was like, tell me more about this. Everyone tells me this is wrong. Tell me more. I want to hear about it. I want to hear about it from History Channel or anyone else. Tell me what your views are. And so he sent me Might is Right. And at the same time, I had a gallery called Goat Gallery, and I was selling satanic Bibles out of there. And I'd flip through it, and I was like, yeah, this is common sense. Yeah, big fucking deal. I didn't see the satanic Bible as anything but common sense to me. It wasn't, it was cool, but it was like, okay. And someone brought in Might is Right and said, you got to check out, someone brought in the Satanic Bible and said, you got to read this. You sold so many of these, you have to read it. And so I was reading them at the same time, and I was like, this is the same fucking book. And I went to the person that gave me the Satanic Bible, and I told them this is the same book. And they're like, no, everyone rips off LeVay. And I'm like, no, this is older than LeVay. And so right there, as I'm exploitive, I was like, I got a shot. So I contact Peter and Peggy, and then I contact LeVay directly because there was nonsense with that. And I contact LeVay directly, and I said, listen, I'm going to publish this book, and I'm going to market it towards Goths and Satanists and tell them that it looks like he plagiarized this. So
So were you in contact with LeVay before that, or was this
no,
your first
nope.
cold call
First,
to
yeah,
the Black House?
first thing, I stapled a $100 bill onto the letter, but I had done that a handful of times to get interviews. Like I knew because I'm from Chicago, so it wasn't for a membership. And so yeah, it was a cold call. It was just like that. Boom. I wanted to talk to him. I said, I know you're a busy man. I hope this helps raise this. It gives you this gets me to the top of the stack, gets me an answer. I want an answer quick. And I'm going to do this. And I don't care what you say. And I don't care what anyone says. I'm going to publish this towards Satanists. And I got a quick reply. And then they sent me a membership, and I sent it back. And Blanche sent it back to me again, said, use it when it behooves you. It was funny. Because I'm like, I'm not a member of anything. I don't want anything. I don't want anything from you. I want this. I want you to write the forward to this book then. And so he did. And we had a great friendship after that for a brief time before he passed away. he appreciated that I was not a yes man. I wasn't a person who was a follower of his, but I had quite the reputation in the underground as a publisher who put out really extreme books that shouldn't see print, people would say. And so it was on then, and then, we met and we hung out, and after I hung out, they were like, you have the authority to speak for Satanism in my book, my Satanic Bible. And I was like, what does that get me though? What does it get me in cold hard cash? And they just laugh at me. They're like, use it when it behooves you. They would say, don't, use it wherever you can, wherever it will help. And I just didn't care. It was like, I cared as like a metalhead that started publishing out of my car as a homeless person. That's where I started publishing. I was like, this is like the Academy Awards of heavy metal. I'm a metalhead, so I've got the greatest thing ever. Anton LaVey gave me a membership to the Church of Satan. And so, priesthood. And I thought that was the coolest thing in that circle, but I couldn't see how it could be applied to any kind of society in the underground. But I'm trying to climb out of the underground. I'm doing these books and I'm selling obscene comics. No one can sell these. And I'm finding out a way, like I figured out a way to sell 3,000 Mike Diana comics, and underground comic people were like, they don't even understand how I sold 3,000 of this obscene comic. So I really worked hard at taking what was in front of me and turning it, and what I liked and what drove my passion, and turning it into something that got me out of a car and got me an apartment, got me a studio, and turned into a business. And so, yeah. but the LaVey stuff, this Church of Satan stuff, I didn't really ever want to use it. I wasn't really into that too much. I just didn't, it didn't matter. It wasn't going to get me anything, is what I'm saying. And I wasn't in doing what I was doing for identity reasons. I'm not in it to make friends. I'm in it to make money and art, and I'm in it to make problems. And so the LaVey thing, it would make me friends, let's say. It would make me fake friends. Women would hit on me, I get free dinners, stuff like that. But I never liked that stuff.
Right. That just makes more friends, just means more problems.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And they want you to talk too much. And it's just too much. It's too much. Yeah, it's a energy exchange that isn't fair. I like to deal with people who are above me, or it's some sort of peer. I don't know if I believe in peers or competitors, but someone who's producing and into their passion. And I like to deal with artists. I'm an artist and I deal with artists, and I like to go in artist studios and see what they make and hang out with them, have coffee, talk about philosophy and art. But outside of that, I'm not really looking to be an anomaly or whatever it is, interesting person. I just want to, so it's just like that.
Let's move on to the next phase in the development of this very interesting story, which I think is connected with a podcast. Like you were doing a 24-hour podcast at one point, like live. Was it a live?
Yes, it was stream? It was the first streaming live podcast on the internet.
And what year was this?
Oh, I forget.
90s?
It's in the book.
2000?
It's 2000 something or other.
2000 something?
Yeah. Let me look in the front. But yeah, it was the first live streaming podcast. Where is that? It's a lot to look up right now. I'm not going to be able to find it, I don't think, because I'm worried about how I look.
I feel like do you remember alt Satanism?
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like I might have heard about some of this on the alt Satanism news groups, like back in the day when that was like the main thing, that people were doing.
Oh yeah, it's I guess it's legendary. It came some youngsters that do this thing called the Infernal Church, where they did a 20th anniversary of it. They did a 24-hour radio show, streaming podcast, because of the impact that had on younger people. They said it was what brought all younger people into Satanism wasn't necessarily Satanic Temple. It was that podcast. It was so controversial. We did, it is very controversial. I did an anniversary show where I had to come back and say, I apologize for some of the stuff, because it was, uh, as far as representing Satanism. We made jokes in a broad way, hurt people's feelings in a broad way. Used the N word, talked about Jewish folks in a weird way, and so you know, when you listen to that show, it's like for me, I'm in the free speech lane, so I'm like, this is the first time that we haven't had middlemen on the internet. The internet was new, so we didn't have middlemen. We didn't have to go to the newspaper to write a letter to the editor. We didn't have to ask a TV station to put us on. That we were able to broadcast. So I was saying really rude things across the board.
Well,
We
and
had,
the internet, now the internet is totally managed. It's totally managed through social media and stuff like that. And it's monitored. And it's like, you can't
right,
say anything. So, go ahead.
right back then. So I had Nazis on that, George Hawthorne on there, Tom Metzger. We had, but I had a very eclectic group of people on there. Those people are weaponized against me today. What we did on that show, the smaller things on that show are weaponized against me, and Satanists in general from that era. But for me, it wasn't. I like I explained it today. I've been racist, but I've never been prejudiced. So I said racist things on there, but I've never been a prejudiced person. I've never discriminated with anyone I work with. And so Doug, on the other hand, Doug from the Satanic Temple, he put a lot of eugenic stuff into the conversation. So he had a different motivation. And I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I'm saying his motivation was different than mine.
And
And
so he
so,
was working with you on the podcast,
oh
right? He was
yeah,
like a co
yes.
anchor
Yes, he
type.
was. He was a
Okay.
protege of mine. I was his mentor, and it was like that. And like when he wanted to join the Church of Satan, you had to fill out applications, and they'd make you wait. And I asked Peter to let him in right away. So I jumped him into the COS. He was a member of the Church of Satan and enjoyed it. And in the book, he sticks up for LaVey and the Church of Satan, where now he doesn't. He talks all this shit about it. But yeah, we were great friends for a long time, probably a decade. We were great friends. And so this idea of starting a lobbyist group, a satanic lobbyist group started, we were first started, he brought it up at that radio show. And so, at the time I was like, oh, that seems weird. I didn't discount it, but I wasn't really attracted to it. But yeah, that show is quite controversial, and it's used as a weapon now with a group of anarchists, one of which has made this book called Neo-Nazis and the Counterculture. And it's a weird situation, to
So
be in.
how did you know Doug originally? Was it through I mean, did you meet him at a party somewhere or
Well, Doug came to me. Doug kept calling my 800 number when I was selling Might Is Right, and wanted a copy. And as an underground publisher, like if I get a flat tire, you get a flat tire. My books don't get to the post office. I'm living dollar to dollar. And so a lot of times it took me 6 months to ship a book out sometimes. But that's back in the day before the internet too much. And so Doug wanted this book. He kept calling the 800 number. Then he's like, hey, I'll take you out anywhere you want to eat, sushi or anything you want, if I could stop by and pick up a book. I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so he
and he
stopped by.
what he lived in Chicago
He lived in
also?
Detroit.
Detroit, is that where you were at the time?
No, I was in Chicago. He traveled down to Detroit to
Oh,
take me out to Sushimi and pick up a copy of Might Is Right. And he really, he worked at Barnes and Nobles at the time, and he was really into Satanism. And he was really impressed, like that's one of those things, a lot of people are really impressed to meet someone that had a friendship with Anton LaVey, let alone, I'm the last priest LaVey made before he died. So I'm the last of the old guard. So that was an impressive thing. It still is. It's really impressive now to people. But it was back then as well. And so he was just one of these people. And I was like, yeah, we could do that. And he gave me a stack of his artwork book, like sketchbooks and stuff like that. He's like, here, I want to get published by you. And I looked through him, and he's a real smart guy. He's a real smart guy. So I, appreciate smart people like yourself. I appreciate, I found you on internet. I was like, oh, this guy's real smart. And so that's how it started. And Doug hung out and we did things. And when Radio Free Satan came to me, the old owners, Honey Hellfire and Rich, came to me and they're like, we want you to do a podcast. We need some of the hierarchy to do a podcast on this streaming radio show. It took me about a year to figure out if I wanted to do it. And I looked into what streaming was and what the internet was and the future of the internet. And I was like, okay, I want to do this. This is the future. And so when I started to put together a show, I wanted cohorts. I didn't want it just to be me talking. I wanted some people to help out, fill the dead space and make it entertaining. And the first person I thought of was Doug, because he's a smart guy. And so the first show I did to kick that off, my podcasting career, was that 24-hour podcast. And it was the first 24-hour streaming radio show on the internet. And it's still alive. Like I said, young 16-year-olds were doing a 24-hour podcast
Right.
as a tribute to it. So, and that's, for me as an artist, that's cool. When
Right.
something you do survives over 20 years and it's not letting up, and now it's being used as a weapon, and it's cool to me.
Oh yeah, no, it just it had an effect for sure. It cut the knife cut deep. Um,
I've been
so you and Doug are working on this podcast, and he had mentioned we want to, maybe we should start doing lobbying for, like, political like, what kind of political things did he want to, like, lobby for? Is this the kind of stuff that eventually became the bread and butter of the Satanic Temple? It's like,
they're a glorified law firm. Yeah, he wanted power. He wanted to climb power, governmental power. He wanted to be involved in the system. And going back to what a counterculture is and what LeVay, there's a reason LeVay gave me the authority to speak for this stuff. And I get it now as an older person. It's because I was part of the counterculture, and I had friends that were white Panthers why I was part of the counterculture before LeVay jumped me into the counterculture. I was working with white Panthers like John Sinclair. I was working with yippies. I was working with old hippies that were blowing up statues. I was working with the Weather Underground, Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn. So I was working with radicals already. And so they clued me into what was going on. I didn't know I was a young person doing a zine, and got involved in this stuff, and it was just so exciting. And they challenged me all the time, where I was like, oh, I can't argue that. That's brilliant. And so, Doug wanted to be part of the status quo, and I'm like, we sort of turned our back on that. We didn't sort of. We turned our back on the status quo. We make our own world. We make our own rules over here. We don't pay. That's not us. That's them. And it's much like when I wanted to burn Bibles or do some shit like that when I was younger. LeVay would, LeVay, Blanche, all of them would talk me out of it in a way where, like, we don't care about them. It's, we don't, that's not our thing. You're giving them too much power.
yeah,
We make our own rules. We make our own rules. So I was like, oh, I get it. Okay, I won't burn the Bible in public, but young anger. And so Doug wanted to be a part of that. And I'm listening. I did a soda pop company, so I'm willing to be a part of the societal issues here and there if I'm going to make some money and get ahead, no doubt. But for me, I have an integrity that might not be the best all the time, because I didn't feel like selling things out or
right.
doing something that was contrary to something I believed in. I think
No, there's just something. I mean, for me, for my satanic sensibilities, there's just something fundamentally unsatanic about wanting to to push a political agenda and thus allying yourself with anything. If anything, I mean, resisting political agendas, I think, is what we spend more time wanting to do.
right. And so I believed, I still do. I believe that Satanism in its the essence of Satanism from LeVay is about freeing people up. It's not about it having control over people. It's about people having control over themselves and having a realistic outlook on what's going on in their life, and
Yeah.
not being idealistic. And I think politicians are idealistic, much like religions are idealistic. I'm an artist, so I can be idealistic. I can be a poet, dream of love and all these great things. Love is going to cure it all. But I'm a realist too, and no, that's not true. It's empirically wrong. Love's going to do nothing. No, I'm joking. But, so I just wasn't, it didn't add up to me in a reasonable way. It didn't add up. Nothing was adding up there, and I couldn't find a way to make it add up like I could with a soda pop or selling t-shirts or something like that. I couldn't figure out a way to equate it with anything that was going to make me happy. And especially
it's a divergence from the individualistic nature of it. To
right,
me,
right.
it's such a fundamental thing. The essence of it is individualistic, and we know Anton like had his influences he took some influences from Ayn Rand, which is
Yeah.
another thing that he was like straight up about that, and that is one of them right there. That the individualism, that is the moral high ground. That is the moral high ground over collectivism and altruism and stuff like that. And so to go and say, well, we're going to be satanic, but we're going to be collectivists though, and push for this like collective movement or something is like, you missed the most important thing. The most important thing I think about this system, and that is at its core I know that Anton would never say a moral basis of it, but using more Ayn Rand's like terminology, the moral basis is individualism, and once you decide on that, everything else falls into place. And while Anton would not have used that terminology, I think everything else he talks about falls in place with that. That is at the center of it. There's nothing that he ever did that was in conflict with that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, he might not use the word morals, but he would use values, possibly the word
Yeah,
values. And
exactly.
I
Yeah.
think there's within that context, there's the idea of the greatest quote, and I wish Church of Satan people, when they argue with Satanic Temple people, would use this more. They don't. They usually get sucked into the argument Doug and the Satanic Temple want, which is the wrong thing. But the idea is that not the individual, but we're not able to be stuck to the wall, which was one of the greatest things when I read that, like Satanists can't be stuck to the wall. We can agree with some of the things Trump says, and we can agree with some of the things Bernie Sanders says, and we can agree with some of the things even Joe Biden. I hate this. I hate all of them. Not at this point. We can agree with a little bit of everything and not and a lot of nothing of it. And so it's like I like the idea like we can't be stuck to the wall. And so it's within that individual context, the individual, when these people use, well, I'm an individual and I decide to be a collectivist, but you can't be stuck to the wall like that. It's not a safe position when you're wearing a satanic thing to go, yeah, I'm a Satanist and I'm for or against abortion. It's not safe. It puts a target on your chest. Being nuanced and is the smartest way to go about things. You could navigate a little better through life. So I like that idea, and I find most Satanists that I meet or call themselves Satanists, those are the ones that I can guarantee have a clue as to when you can't really stick them to the wall when you talk to them and things sort of, they're all over the place with their beliefs. And I think that's cool.
Right. So there was a point where all of this is evolving with you and Doug on this podcast, and then there's a point where you start talking about doing public pranks and stuff, and there's like one in particular that you talk about in the book, where you were going to be Lucian Graves.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, they were looking for someone to do Lucy and to do this character Lucy and Greaves for the Florida Rick Scott rally, a satanic rally, and we got to talking, and I wanted editorial control. Like I wanted to make sure, if at the time we were doing a prank film, like a Yes Man film. And so, but the concept of what happened with the Satanic Temple had always been kicking around with me and Doug. So it wasn't just, it didn't pop up. But what I was involved with was a film. And so I understand as a filmmaker myself that the magic is in the editing. I can film you, but when I edit it, I can make you say anything I want. And so I knew that I needed to have some sort of say over what was the final edit, and they wouldn't give that to me, so I wasn't going to do it. I was also I was overweight at that time, and I didn't think that was going to present well on film, so I definitely needed editorial control. And so when that didn't happen, they hired an actor, And, Doug and I both disagreed with that. But Doug was not willing to put himself on the line at that point. He was still he was going to Harvard and he was a careerist and he was looking to have a career. So he knew that putting a public Satanist label on him he saw my life. He was my protege. He saw me being run out of towns, more than once. So it's not the easiest one. It's back in my day, at least, it wasn't easy to be a public Satanist. And quite frankly, I don't think it is today.
No.
The word Satan is a heavy word. And so Doug had reservations, so they hired this actor and they failed miserably at that. And we both, I told them we were going to fail and we did. And then we went on to the Pink Mass. And that's when Doug stepped in as Lucian.
Okay.
I tried to get Matt Zane from Society One, this rock band. I was like, hire Matt Zane. Matt Zane would do it. He understands Satanism and he looks good.
Uh-huh.
Where, he looked, it would have worked.
So up to this point, then the Satanic Temple was just an idea, or was it actually becoming an organization?
After the Rick Scott thing, after that actor hit, we had a small viral moment. Small. It was viral for a couple days. Like this Satanist did this thing, and all of a sudden, Doug's tone changed. He's like, "Man, we can do this as a real deal, a religion. We can make money. We can sell T-shirts. He was talking about having a wheat farm in fucking Italy or some shit like that. He's like, this can get me out of the country. This can give me my money. This is our ticket." And all of a sudden, then he's talking to Kevin and Kevin's partner. They were partners in a filmmaking project, and Doug was helping. Doug then wanted to be in on it contractually. And that's when things started to change. And I'm like, well, if you're in on it contractually, I want to be in on it contractually. And then that got, I was getting hustled and I, understood that. So I was like, I pulled back. I'm like not giving them any more of my authority, my legitimacy as a Satanist. Coming from Anton LaVey's, the old guard of Anton LaVey, there's a legitimacy to that, and it carries weight. And so we started to pull away. That started to happen. And I was pulling away, and then they offered me a bunch of money to do the Pink Mass, so I took it. They still owe me money, by the way, but. And so that was the next project, and that's the one that hit in the international viral that didn't stop. It just kept going for weeks and weeks and weeks. It was a great
at the pink what was it, Pink Mass?
Yeah.
And what was that? What was the Pink Mass exactly? This was another publicity.
Yeah, it was a PR stunt that we all came up with, and the idea was, it was a tennis match. I'm like, you have to attach yourself to someone who is viral, like God Hates Fags. They always get headlines. And they're like, oh, great idea. So they went off and ran with some idea to go after God Hates Fags and go on his mom's, do their thing on the God Hates Fags mother's grave, and, create, and so they go do this and they hire actors again. And it's lame. Like they hired people to like kiss on the, gay people to kiss on the tombstone, but they weren't gay. They were actors. So you could see the kisses were like awkward. The guys were like barely wanting to kiss, stuff like that. I'm like, no, you need a porno. You need to film a porn on that fucking thing. You need to fuck. You want to get viral. And so Doug's calling me. He's like, this thing's falling apart. And I go, again, because that fucking Kevin idiot, the guy with money. I go, Doug, there has to be nudity. You have to get those people to take their shirts off. And they're like, no one here will get nude. I'm like, dude, then you do it. You fucking do something. And he's like, what can I do? I go, I don't know. Fucking put your nuts on that tombstone. Do something, dude. And he's like, I can do that. So he goes and puts his balls on the tombstone. He gets a picture of it. That was our viral. Boom. Putting balls on the, God Hates Fags, putting balls on his mom's tombstone. That just created the fucking thing. It just took off after that. You need those elements. You need the sexual element. And I'm a person who studies the greatest black magician of all, Edward Bernays. So, we need these, there's certain elements the Freudian elements that are going to trigger everyone in the fucking world, every human that hears about it. And that's what worked, and it took off big time. And then we started talking about doing the statue, and we were going to do the statue originally in Florida. But my friend,
the famous Baphomet statue.
But it was going to be a statue I made. We were just talking about a satanic statue, so we didn't talk about the Baphomet. It was going to be like Shane sculpting. He'll make a satanic statue from the satanic priest from Church of Satan. put it in Florida. But my friend Edwin Kagan, he was the lawyer for the American Atheists at the time. Edwin's passed away now. But Edwin got a hold of me and asked me not to do anything because he had a case down there and he thought it would reflect poorly on this case he was fighting. So we pulled away. We didn't do it. And then things started to fall. I'm seeing, I'm like, yeah, I need to be on the contract. You owe me money. I need this. I need this. And so we just split up. Then it became like that. I wasn't going to talk. I wasn't going to help him anymore. But I had already helped him too much at that point.
So you were out. You were just officially, I'm done, and you're completely out of it at that point.
Yeah, and they didn't need me at that point. They didn't need to negotiate with me. They had the viral moment. They had a lot of people coming their way, and they could see by the numbers,
Uh-huh.
they had something, and they didn't need my help anymore. And so, it's just one of those things.
And was the organization at that point, were they at the point of charging a membership fee and sending out membership kits and all that, and chapter?
No, another thing about that is like it was free. It's free to join, and that's what I said. In order to get any members, you have to make it free. The Church of Satan charges, and if you want to compete with Peter, you have to make it free. And the only way that you're going to really springboard is getting Peter to mention your name, and you're going to get Peter to mention your name when you're drawing people to the group. So make it free, introductory, and then sell the card on the upsell, do upsells, T-shirts, shit like that. But just free, sign up online with your email and you're a member. And that, if you want to be a lobbyist group, because we're talking about having that kind of powers in numbers. And so free is going to get that for you. Free coupon, free is going to get you numbers. Where, being an exclusive club isn't, and Church of Satan is more exclusive.
Right. But were they that formalized and structuralized where they were taking
it wasn't
very informal? Anyone could say, hey, I'm in the TST, and
right. It was still a movie. They were filming a movie at the grave. It was still a film. It had nothing to do with a religion at that point. But when, like I said, it was mentioned, and then we broke away. And I think, Doug, Lucian understood that I wasn't wanting to go that way. When we discussions, I said, I feel uncomfortable working with this rich kid. I don't know him well enough. I know you. But you could see in this book, it's 10 years prior to that moment we're talking about. He's talking about meeting, or many years before that moment. That when he's like, I'm going to be in LA with the guy from Skinny Puppy, with William Morrison, which is involved in the hierarchy of the TST, and Kevin, and I want you to be there to talk about our ideas. So we were talking about this kind of stuff years before it happened, and so, they took advantage of that, Doug brought that idea to the kid with money, and they ran with it. And they know I wanted something. I wanted more. I wanted power. I wanted say in the group. I wanted to have, editorial say or direction. I wanted to be able to direct things. And that wasn't
to try and why did you want to try and direct it? Did you want to try and keep in some of that essence, some of that legitimacy that you got?
I would have
on and everything.
Yeah, I would have kept it like a yes man, a practical joke group. I wouldn't have been looking to motivate politicians. I would have been looking to do performance art and get into headlines. Satanic Temples, whatever, doing something here, we're doing something there, just to get into headlines and to mock whatever it is we wanted to mock. But I wouldn't have wanted to fight for abortion rights or not. I wouldn't have wanted to do stuff like that. I would have looked to mock whoever I was mocking, whoever it is, like a Christian country Christian artist. I think they did something like that, and I was like, that's reminiscent of what we were doing. The country and Western artist caused some hoopla, and they started to go after that. And so I would not have wanted to be involved in the status quo. I would have kept it an art group. I think Satanism, from the LaVey era, was an art movement, and it's an art movement. It's full of artists and intellectuals and philosophers and writers, and not too many other people.
Right. No, it's totally, when you study the history, you look at the history of how the Church of Satan came into being and the things that he was doing in those those early years of it, you really get that sense of that this was just like this was a I don't know, performance art is not strong enough of a word for it, because it
Right.
was more than that. It's because he's dedicated to one specific. There's something that he's like. There's something that Anton LaVey is loyal to underneath all of this. That dark force in nature and stuff. And you can see that it started out like that, and then all these people, he started drawing in all of these people, and then so they started adding structure to accommodate it, and then it starts to become something else. But he like really was trying to maintain that and keep that essence like in there.
And
um,
I think it's pathetic to try to attach yourself to power. And that's what they're trying to do when they attach themselves to political stuff, is to 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 not recognize the individual's power and to go, we want to attach ourselves to this political cause because it has power. I would have kept it in a way that I understood we do have power and we can just go out and mock these things or do this cool event or create an orgy, like a public kind of, I would have worked more with rave parties or, on that level. I'm not really sure. I have to think about what's going on around us, but I think everything's, I guess, political when you think about it. Every kind of decision you make is political. But I would have wanted it to be more like a satanic yes men, fun,
right,
giving
right.
and,
Well, there's the difference is collectivism basically, and that's what I kind of hear you defining in a lot of this. And there's somewhere in this in your book, in one of the interviews, and there's a lot of like great interviews in here that you've preserved. There's one in here somewhere where Doug Messner is specifically saying that he wants to integrate Satanism with altruism and collectivism. And it's like, I remember when I read that line in there, I just like had this sense. I had this sense reading of, oh, that's where it all happened. That's where this like. I can't call it an unholy marriage because it doesn't make sense in a satanic perspective to say this, but this alliance of things that aren't really aren't supposed to go together. Because yeah, as an individual, like you say, like, well, everything's political to some extent, right? Yeah, no, I have to make decisions about what I'm going to do in life and interact with other people and stuff like that. But from a satanic left hand path perspective, I'm doing that from a perspective of rational self-interest,
right.
rather than this is the way it needs to be for everybody, or I need to attach myself with this in order to gain power, like you're saying, so we can make everything better for everybody, because everybody should live like just like I think they should live. I mean,
You
there's a
know,
way of like navigating. There's most definitely a way of navigating your way through life in a way that is largely peaceful and prosperous, without without you know being in constant conflicts with people, and without having to like sign yourself over to a group or something like that. And to me, that's like a major point of it all.
yeah, yeah. There's two things. I want to go back to the idea, like we were talking about, what would I have done with the Satanic Temple? I guess I would have wanted to show the weaknesses in our government versus joining our government, or like I
Yeah,
would have wanted to poke fun at the Julian Assange thing and the Edward Snowden thing, or how there are laws on the books that aren't used, but
yeah,
we complain about them. So I would have wanted to poke fun at the government and the status quo, not be part
yeah,
of it. And
yeah,
so, but on what you're saying about that, yes, that's true. And but there's also the idea, like I do think Anton LaVey had a huge heart, and I do think he was when he came up with this, he was a fry cook looking at working class people, and this is where he's coming up with this idea of Satanism. He's looking at working class people and looking at how the system really is. And so, like, when I see Satanism, I see it as the closest thing to Buddhism America will ever get. And talking to like Bill Ayers about it, what is Satan? He's asked me what Satanism is, and I said it's a reflection of our reality. It's not something where Anton LaVey is not saying be a prick, be mean to people, rip people off. He's saying this is what you face in the world. Be prepared. And
yeah,
do the best you can and live and get as much joy out of this fucking ride as you can.
Yeah.
So I see that as so liberating, so cool, so compassionate, or you maybe not compassionate, but very life affirming, or it's cool. It's not this evil. When people, I don't go with the word evil or good, but it's not, he really did such a great work of art, you know, spinning that word and the idea of Satanism into something that is something to free humanity, not enslave them like a religion. And so I see Satanism as a philosophy and not a religion. I think religion you could nail to the wall, and philosophy you can't.
Yeah.
Philosophy is a fluid thought. And so, you know, but I understand, I agree with what you're saying. The collectivism part of it, and the idea that, we need to do good is ridiculous. We need to get by the best we can and what's going to please us. We need to get ahead, without suffering too many hits, and have as much fun as we can while we're doing it.
Oh, absolutely. And you're totally right. Anton LaVey, I mean, I didn't know him personally, but I definitely have that sense that he had a big heart.
Did.
And you do, I mean, doing good, there's the compassion ritual in the Satanic Bible. I mean, doing good is like, and helping other people is like totally fine and satanic
It is.
as as it is done voluntarily. And the reason it becomes a problem with like with collectivism and altruism is because it becomes obligatory. Well, why aren't you doing something? We need to like lobby so that we can force the American people to do good for these other people by robbing their tax money to like go, save people in some other country that they don't know, right?
Right. That's the key element there. It's the judgmental part of their stuff. A lot of, like you're saying, that there was no judgment. It was like, you're going to help people when you want, how you want, and when all that kind of stuff. And that other part of it is like guilting you into helping people, or judging others that don't. And it
Right.
just it becomes one blob versus these strong individuals reaching that idea of social stratification.
Right. And to me, that's like religion. I think we probably agree on this. To me, then it like goes into the realm of religion, which is just almost always inherently a collectivist sort of thing. Like all of the great teachings, even going outside of LaVey and looking at you mentioned like Buddhism and there's other things like that. They're all like, if you look close enough, it's like before it became a religion, there was like a guy with an idea and some other people that he was talking to, and it was like, then it was a system, then it was a philosophy or something like that. But somehow it turns into a structure, and it turns into here's the obligations, here's what everyone else has to do in order to be to be a part of this, and it becomes something different altogether. And all that being said, I understand people call, out of, necessity, we refer to different things as religions and stuff like that. But to me, it's like when it gets down to that personal level of it, it's not really a religion. It's a philosophy. It's a
Right.
system. It's a teaching. It's
Well, LaVey
sort
was playing with people when he used the word religion. Remember, he was trying to get taxes churched, so he was hammering religion in a really artistic way. I loved everything he did, and the thing I continue to see is like people. I wish someone could trump LaVey. I wish someone could do better than him. I do. I really do. I don't mind people being better, you know, but you can't. Like something happened with him. Like he was meant to do it. I don't know what he did, but he had a formula that you cannot beat.
mm-hmm.
I can't see it. Anything that everyone that tries is trying to be what he was versus he's like this great artist, like he was just drug along, and
Yep.
and it became, versus I want to do what he's doing, which is what you see all around is these people trying to be what LaVey was, and he was really
Right.
a cool artist, great artist. And
Yeah.
like he did have a huge heart, dude. He was like a cool guy, a good guy, like as mobsters would say, he was a good guy. Like the LaVey was so cool. Like that's the reason I put up with Stanton. because, I'm one of his old guard. And so a lot of stuff Stanton, played around with or, fucked with me on, I would have never dealt with that. But I wanted to, be there for his grandson, just like he was there for his grandson, and just like his wife was there for his grandson, So it's just one of those things you do from a Chicago point of view, from a working class point of view, when you're friendly with someone and they pass away, you sort of try to look after their family when you can. Well,
Yeah.
you know, the
Well,
best. Right.
someone else that you mentioned, John Sinclair and the White Panther Party. Do you know? Did you know Lenny Sinclair,
His wife?
his wife?
I spoke with her on the phone, but I did not know her.
So I knew her. She,
Really?
yeah, she took photographs of my band.
Ooh.
Yeah, and this is like another this you will believe my story and you will appreciate it. So, and this was like 2001 or so. We got there was a record label that I'm not going to mention that basically got us connected with recording at a studio in Detroit with this guy named Victor Pirano, who used to be in a band called Kingdom Come and had like was connected with all these people. He got Dennis Machine Gun Thompson from the MC5 to come play drums on one of our
Ah,
tracks. We got Lenny Sinclair came and hung out with us for a day and did like band photos around some like really great areas in Detroit. And all of this, none of this shit exists anywhere because then the fucking bitch record label fucked it all up, and and everyone like just the studio, Lenny like just we don't want to like get involved with it now, and so none of it ever saw the light of day. But for a week, I was up there in the middle of it. I was hearing stories about White Panther stuff, and all these kinds of things. So to hand it back to you, were you involved with the White Panthers? White Panthers? Do you go that far back? What was your connection there?
well, I was a zinester. I started doing zines. I got involved when I saw Frank Zappa on TV. I didn't know he was a musician, and he was on the PMRC hearings and when they were labeling records. And I was like, "What's going on here?" And right there,
Yep.
I'm a dumb young kid in the suburbs, and I'm like, "What the fuck is the concept of free speech? Who the fuck? I got a voice. I got all the speech I want. No one's giving me permission. I say what I want." So I didn't understand this concept of someone giving you permission to say what you wanted. It was like it was the dopiest thing I ever heard. Like I was like, that is the stupidest fucking thing I ever heard. Who is following this garbage? And so Frank Zappa came on. He was going after the PMRC and talking about like, if that kid would have hurt himself based on your color of your tie, if it weren't the song, there was something wrong with the person. And this album, again, he sounded so brilliant. I was like, wow, I want to sound like him. He's so fucking smart.
Uh-huh.
So I
Yep.
started attaching myself to this free speech movement, the idea of free speech. And I started to understand it. I'm like, oh, wow, this is brutal. This is fucked up. We got, so I'm free speech, that was my politics. I was all about free speech. And so I put out a zine and I contacted the PMRC and interviewed them. And the headline said, censor this asshole. Really silly stuff. Right. It was silly. And so um, that's where it started. And then I was known around Chicago for doing the zine called Naked Aggression. And someone got me a job. Someone's like, you should go talk to the Underground Comics Hall of Fame. They're trying to get someone to help them with their comic zine called Bonus. And so I went there and I did this interview with these two old hippies. And at some point they're asking me, do you know who R. Crumb is? I'm like, no. And they're asking me who this is. No. Do you know Black Pink? No, I don't know any of them. And they're
Oh,
like,
before your
what?
time.
Yeah. And they're like, why would we work with you? And I go, I don't know. Fuck you. And I go to leave and I'm like, hold on. Do you know who Ace Backwards is? Do you know who Mike Diane is? Do you know who this is? Do you know who that is? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, then why would I work with you? And they're like, you're fucking great. This is great. So then we just started going. We worked together, and in that they did the Underground Comics Hall of Fame. They were friends with all these underground radicals, and I was serving. Then they gave me an apartment in a real bad neighborhood, slumlord shit. They owned a building, and they gave me an apartment, and I started working on their zines for them and doing all this stuff. And then I met like Allen Ginsberg came into the bar, and he
Wow.
serving drinks, and Alan's like, the owner of the bar is like, Mike, can you take over? I want this guy to sit next to me. He's hilarious and smart. And so I got to sit next to Allen Ginsberg, but I didn't know who he was. And he liked me because, again, I didn't give him that kind of respect. Like they were getting all this yes man shit. And I was like, I said some shit to him like, yeah, what's it to you? Who gives a fuck? Something like, something smarty. And he was like, loved it. And so then I, met John Sinclair, met these White Panthers, these radicals, Bob Rudnick, he's got gone, people don't know that name, but Bob Rudnick was a big deal. Larry Flint had mobsters come in and beat Rudnick with the phone books until blood came out of his ears to get a hold of the hustler name, because Bob Rudnick, the hustler came out of Chicago, actually, not Ohio. So Rudnick was a counterculture hero. And then I met Bob Rudnick, and I would go over to Rudnick's house, and he's an old man, and I'm young, and he'd like, Shane, drive me around. I would drive around and score heroin and go back, and he'd tell me these stories, and then he'd nod off for a handful of hours. And I just sit there and watch him nod off, waiting for him to come to tell me another story about the 60s. Because this is pre-internet, kids. There was no way to find this information truly, like they would tell me, these counterculture guys, and it's still the truth to this day. It goes mouth to ear. Our history goes mouth to ear. And so they're like, you got to all the beatniks were like, you got to document things, these hippies, you got to document, and you got to tell, we tell our own story here. Don't let them tell the story. Do your own zines, do your own media, do your own stuff. And so that's where I started to really take my zine stuff seriously. And so, I met all these radicals, and it was always hilarious because I was like cheering on Waco. I remember cheering on Waco. Like, I'm glad those Christians are getting killed. I'm glad. And they're like, how the fuck are you saying this? It's a government doing this. So they came down on me. They came down on me in a way where they educated me. By the end of the thing, I'm crying. I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? I'm a young idiot, and all these guys are all these the counterculture before my generation is teaching me stuff. And then I remember like the Fred Hampton story, they were telling me about it. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here. The government's not going to go kill someone like that. That's ridiculous. You guys paranoid or something. And all of a sudden they march in Black Panthers. All these people, the guy who took the white guy who took the photos for the Black Panthers in that time, where he went in and took all the photos of them laying there dead and shit like that. And he brought in all these photos, and they told me the story. And again, I'm sitting there crying and feeling like such a, red-faced, egg on my face, feeling so dopey that I was cheering something on that I shouldn't have been, and it was a serious situation. And that, but you grow up and, you're taught history that isn't true. The American history.
Oh, yeah. No, totally. And that point right there is something I can totally relate to. When Waco was happening, I remember seeing that. I was like in college at the time. I think I remember watching it in the student union. The tanks like fucking crashing in when they're showing that on the news, and the tank with a flamethrower and stuff like that, like into the house. And I remember, oh well, that's crazy, but that's probably good because they were a crazy Christian cult. And I just accepted like the narrative. It wasn't until many years later that I like went back and became a little bit wiser about how things like work and how that's okay if a group of people want to go off by themselves and not hurt anyone and own guns. That's not a crime, let alone roll through their house with tanks and like burn them all to the ground. And another one, John Sinclair. He like didn't John Sinclair get put in prison
10 years for
decades for like a small amount of marijuana?
10 years for 2 joints. John Lennon has a song about it. Yeah.
No, it's crazy.
Go ahead.
Well, just that before you're when you're still a little bit younger, you don't realize the mighty awesome power that the government wields to really destroy things, and it just destroys like all of the best things. So
this is like 20 years ago, something during those Might Is Right show, that 24-hour broadcast during my podcasting days. And I was all like, burn this place down. We want revolution, blow up the fucking cities, kill everyone. And then the internet happened and video was happening. And then I was able to see war live broadcast from Palestine. Ironically, this is 20 some years ago. It's been happening that long, and got to see people filming live and hearing depths of screams of people, children, everyone screaming as buildings are on top of them. And I was like, oh my God. And I saw the reality of what I had been wishing for. And I was like, oh, I don't want anything like that.
Hmm.
I don't believe I can't,
Yeah.
I almost feel like crying now thinking about that because it's like, I wish that upon people and I wish I had never thought that way. I didn't have a realistic idea. And so it was like, yeah, I don't want anything like that in the world. And
I
so,
relate to that so much, man. I relate to that so much because I was the same way. Like there was a point there in the late '80s, early '90s where I was very, very much a satanic nihilist. I would
yeah,
say I can't think of a better word for it, but I was. Oh yeah, we need to burn everything to the ground. Um, and 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 during the Iraq War, Bush two Iraq conflict, when, like you said, internet is going on and everything. I remember seeing, I found this website from this independent journalist over there. And I can't remember his name right now, but he put out a DVD called Tales from Fallujah. Right. And he was like going around the streets, like videoing stuff that was like actually happening over there. And I saw all that shit happening, and I'm like, no, there's something like fucking wrong about all of this. There's something just horribly wrong about all this. I became super anti-war. Is like really kind of been the basis of my. If I have a politics, it's based on anti-war,
yeah,
um, unnecessary wars. Of course, self-defense and everything is a different thing, but I mean, all of the wars in different countries against people that we don't know, and it really like changed my perspective on things, and I've just stayed like that ever since.
yeah. I'm with you there. It was a hell of a thing. Speaking of Waco, like 10 years later, I got to visit the compound, the area, and met Clive, the guy who came out of the building on fire. And Clive had to rub this lotion on his skin every hour. He smelled of this chemical because he had no skin. It was all burned up. And to talk to him personally really brought a depth to me cheering that on, a depth of sorrow that I ever said anything like that to a whole nother level because he
Uh-huh.
was such a kind man. Even though they had like a wacky belief system, I'm pretty certain they thought I had a wacky belief system too. So we're, evened each other out.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was heavy to see the area, the pool, how they live, that area firsthand, walking in that dirt. It was just sad because I was still looking through like burned big wheels,
Yeah.
still chunks of burned big wheels and stuff like that. And I was just like, this is just, I can't believe that happened on TV. We saw it and we didn't, and nothing, no justice came from that.
Right.
I mean, you could
No.
say Timothy McVeigh enacted justice on that situation, a vigilante justice, but
Yeah.
there was no justice for that.
Yeah. So this brings me to another thing I wanted to ask you about, which I believe that you mentioned in the book or somewhere, is what do you think about Osho?
I love Osho. I love Osho. I think Osho's great. I would have I liked his 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 hustle is great, man. I love his hats, his wardrobe, his thrones, the free sex, the cars, and he
Uh-huh.
was a big believer in might is right. Osho is a big believer in might is right.
So yeah, so this is another. I'm thinking of it in terms of like what we're talking about with Waco. This is like another example for me. When in the '80s, Osho was in trouble and he was on the media, he's getting chased out of the country. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, he's crazy cult, right hand path, Buddhist cult leader or something like that. And of course, I didn't know shit about, what was like actually going on, and I just wrote it all off. And it wasn't until years later that I started to see, and because of the internet, because the internet starts putting out more and more information other than just that narrow narrative that used to be controlled by these very
Mhm.
few like media superpowers, right?
Right,
And
right.
so you start seeing other things, and it's like, oh, well, he's pretty dope. He's got some pretty good talks and stuff like that.
Smart man.
And it's I like the things that you say about it, and that he adds like a materialist. He's very much a materialism kind of thing, and that's part of a material universe, and interaction with it is part of your you know coming into being, a part of your quest towards enlightenment, in a similar way that Anton LaVey kind of presented it.
Yeah, the Maharishi, I love. Yeah, Osho, I think it's Maharishi or Baharishi. Yeah, I love that whole. I love that. But see, I loved it from a point of view like when I read about him and Jim Jones, I started going to the library and looking it up on microfiche, and I wanted to be a cult leader. I wanted to be them. I wanted to go, how can I do what they're doing? That is cool. And I'm like a kid, like riding my bike up to the library going, this is where it's at. How can I do that? And since then, like even when Doug was talking about making the Satanic Temple a church, I'm like, dude, that's exhausting to have idiots, following.
Right.
It's hard enough for me to sell product online, deal with customers. It's hard enough for that. It's if I had my ideal situation, it would be like if I made a piece of artwork, it would just be I'd slide it out the this. I made this, by the way. I'd slide
Oh,
it
cool.
out the door and give it to you, and then go see you later.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't want to really talk to you about it. Here's the artwork that you bought. Have a nice day. I don't want to have the exchange. I don't
Yeah.
want to talk to you about it. I don't want to have to sell you things. I'd rather give it away. Actually, artwork. I'd rather give artwork away. You know. So that's just
Yeah.
me.
And that's another thing I think you could say about Anton LaVey too, is that he did not want to be a cult leader.
Nope.
That's not what he was going for.
Right. Even when they tried to save the Black House, there was a big, I was a youngster. I was the youngest of the old guard. But when that started happening, Blanche started to try to save the Black House. Carla left the fold. There's all this, of course, when someone dies in a family, all that stuff happens, all that drama happens. But LaVey had he was a big deal. And so Carla started this idea of saving the Black House, making it like an institution, a church almost, or a museum. And a lot of the old guard came out and said, this is not what he wanted. He said he doesn't want a memorial. He doesn't want a service. He doesn't want a gravestone. He didn't want to be that. He didn't want any of that stuff. And I was like, that is so cool. I remember just listening because I really didn't have a say. I was like, yeah, I'll help either way, which way we're going. I'm go team. I was on the
Uh-huh.
team.
Right.
So I didn't know what to say at that point because I was so young and so young in that group. And so, but eventually that worked out. And I remember Blanche refunding everyone their money that donated to save the Black House. She came to her, what they said, the elder people were like, she came to her senses, and that was that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, again, the book, The Founding of the Satanic Temple. What do you hope that this accomplishes in the world?
Well, it's doing really well right now. If you maybe you're not paying attention, but since this has come out, they tried to keep it off Amazon. Like it kept getting pulled off of Amazon for no good reason. Sometimes, like I'd get reasons from the distributor for obscenity, and I'm like, but there's nothing nude in there. It's just words. So I believe someone was using their connections to get the book pulled, or they were playing games. So I had to
Yeah.
get lawyers for the creative arts involved and talk to Amazon and all these other people. And since they did and wrote letters saying at some point we're going to file a discrimination lawsuit if this gets pulled one more time, because there's no reason. You're not citing any legitimate reasons. There's nothing here but bias of some sort. So now it's up, and now it's globally distributed again. And since that's happened, all these Temple of Satan groups are breaking off and quitting the Temple of Satan and starting their own groups, like Reno Satanic. Let's say he started that, a while ago. And so it's like for me, when I see that, at first I was like, what the fuck is going on here? But I become friends with the guy from Reno Satanic. And he's a real reasonable, he's a Satanist. He's a book nerd. He just reads and reads, studies. And as I see it, it's the seeds that the old guard planted. LaVey and all of his priesthood, his people planted. We're seeing that come to fruit. And Satanism is really becoming this individual thing. Like
Mhm.
we don't need a group to tell us what to do. We don't need the Church of Satan. We don't need the
Right.
Satanic Temple. We'll go get the books and create a little study group right here in Reno where we get together for coffee and talk about Satanism. And there is no real hierarchy. There's no I'm the high priest. There's nothing
Yeah.
going on with these groups. They're just like study groups, like the Infernal Church. It's just like a study group. When I look into these groups, I'm like, oh, there's no high priest. There's no high priestess. They're just, yeah, we just get together and talk about it. We just like Satanism. We're
Yeah.
we're listening.
Yeah.
We question everything you're saying, and I love it because they don't bow to authority.
Right.
Even though I come in and go, I have the authority given to me by Anton LaVey. They're like, yeah, what are you saying? What
Right.
you got to say?
Right. No,
Well,
it's like all that structure. A structure just, it sounds like it's gonna like help things, but 9 times out of 10, it just creates more problems.
so I was the first person to break away from the Satanic Temple, and now all these other people are. And the book is helping to. You ask what I hope it does. I hope it gives people genuinely gives people information to make an educated decision, like any book.
Yeah.
So I wanted to put information out there that was being deleted, and it's also to try to save my legacy. It was being rewritten by these people that are from Harvard and have money and resources to cut me out of history somehow. And I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to go away peacefully. I'm older, and I'm going to go away swinging, fighting for my credit and what's mine, and that's mine. That's my credit. I did help with that, and they did this Hail Satan movement and cut me out of it. They didn't, they made a different creation myth and all this stuff, and got a lot of people to attack me, and all this kind of stuff. So it's just sort of like that, fighting back. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I published books for a long time, and it's a lot of it was for revenge or to shake things up or to make people think, let's say, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And in this case, I hope people can make an educated decision based on this book.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, all right. Well, you heard it, people. Like, go get it now. Get it on Amazon while you can before they try and pull it down again.
What do you think of it, Paul?
What do I think of the book?
Yeah,
I think it's great.
good.
No, like I'm about halfway through. So you see my bookmark was like hanging out of it here, so you know that I've been reading it. But just the information behind what's been going on, because like starting with this and watching the Satanic Temple appear and everything and all these things you talked about, your insight on it. I mean, you've been involved with all of these aspects and the evolution of this movement, and getting to see what you presented, because you present a lot of the transcripts. There's transcripts from interviews and stuff like that. A lot of documentation. It isn't just a lot of totally personal self-aggrandizement. It's like there's a lot of really great information, and it's helped fill in a lot of the whys and the wherefores, and confirmation of like certain things that I wondered about. Like it kind of looks like they're trying to mix in altruism with Satanism, and then I see it in here. It's like, okay, I understand. So I found it. I think it's a great book, and it's
Yeah.
also beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful design. The cover design on it. Did you do the cover on it? Who did
No, the
the cover?
artist is Nick Gernert. His name's on the back cover. Nick
Okay.
Nikgernert. Great artist. I can't speak highly enough about him. He does all the Witches Sabbath artwork. He does a lot of artwork for me. He's just a great artist. So I hope people find him because he's a great counterculture underground
Right.
artist.
And then who? This is that's you.
Yep.
That's Doug. Now Lucian Graves, and then who's this?
That's Kevin, the rich kid behind it, the one who funds it. He's got a ton
Okay.
of money. Harvard, rich kid that went to Harvard forever, and he's just an
Yeah.
extremely rich person.
That's the one thing I think that everyone was like, there's some money behind this, watching the
Yeah,
Satanic Temple stuff come up. So,
that's right.
well, awesome. Well, everyone go buy the book. Shane, I really appreciate talking to you. You have to come back and talk to us again
I
sometime.
would love that. ShaneBugbee.com. There you go. There's my plug.
ShaneBugbee.com.
Paul,
Uh,
thank you for all your work. Thanks. Thanks.
absolutely, my friend. Thank you. Keep the dark fire burning and hail Satan.
I'll say it, brother. Peace.
Peace out.